Florida, 1984. Well-to-do real estate and construction company owner Christopher Wilder loved many things: racing cars, showing off his speedboat, amateur photography, and girls. He liked young girls and women. Not to date them, but to dominate them. For the months of March and April in 1984, a guy known as a consummate gentleman with an eye for beauty, Chris will go coast to coast, luring his victims with the promise of modeling contracts and magazine covers, only to abduct the beautiful girls, rape and torture them before ending their life. This is the story of Christopher Wilder, the collector of beautiful things. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potterworth. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends from Estonia, all the way over to Estonia.
Where's Estonia?
It's right outside of Russia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I maybe I flunked geography.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
I'm ready.
Tere telumast, tere telumast, tere telumast.
Very nice.
There you go. Welcome.
Welcome. Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to like, rate, and review. That helps other people to find us.
Yes.
You can join the In-Laws and Outlaws on Facebook. That's our closed group. We have lots of fun in there. And you can watch us on YouTube.
Yeah, last count we had like 152 subscribers.
We're really getting up there.
We're rocking.
That's huge.
Yeah.
We're not at the 3 million mark like so many of them are, but we're getting there, right?
We're happy with 152.
We're happy with whatever
So tell your friends, spread the word.
Yeah, spread the word, spread the love.
Yep.
Well, speaking of love, we love getting cases, and today's case was suggested by Andrea McHenry.
Oh.
So shout out to Andrea for picking this one.
Thank you, Andrea.
This is a crazy story. I didn't even know this story very well. I knew his name. I hadn't really looked into it that much. So, Andrea, good job, because this is a doozy.
Oh, good.
I'm going to jump right into this.
Okay.
Are you ready for it? Before we get started, I'm going to thank some sources: All That's Interesting, Real Crime, the FBI Files, UPI, Murderpedia, The Commercial Appeal, Medium.com, Wikipedia, the Orlando Sentinel, the Miami News, the Daily Telegraph, the Charlie Project, and Lawton Investigations.
All right. Well.
It's a big, long list.
Yeah.
There was lots of stuff on there.
Yeah. Well, I think Scotty's ready. Are you ready?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
Christopher Bernard Wilder is born on March 13th, 1945 in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. His father is Coley Wilder, an American naval officer who was stationed in Australia in World War II.
Okay.
His mother is Australian, and these two meet and fall in love. Coley will marry his wife while he is on leave. Now, Christopher is the oldest of 4 boys, and according to one source, he almost died at birth. Apparently, a priest was called in to do last rites.
Oh, wow.
And then at the age of 2, he nearly drowned in a swimming pool. Wow. He was kind of a sickly little thing.
Does he have 9 lives?
Yes, he does. Yeah, he does. But as a young kid, even his parents had said that when he's 3, he suffered convulsions while riding in the car with his family and had to be resuscitated.
Wow.
So 9 lives, yeah.
I guess my bronchitis when I was a kid isn't that bad then.
Yeah, you and all your recessive genes. We've talked about those,
Yeah.
my little redhead. But the family moved back and forth between Australia and the United States for a bit before they set up house for good in Swatel, Australia. If I said that wrong, I'm so sorry, Australia. We
Sorry,
love you.
Swatel.
We've got lots of listeners there.
We're from Kentucky, so we're allowed to say it that way.
You're from Ohio.
Oh, well, close enough.
But even if I can't pronounce it correctly, this town is 200 miles north of Sydney.
Okay.
And Chris attended Rybee High School in the early 1960s, but dropped out to become an apprentice carpenter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is going to serve him well in the future.
Yeah.
From every source I found, Chris had a normal childhood.
Didn't sound very normal.
Aside from the 3 brushes with death.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But he had 2 loving parents, and his brothers, they were all very supportive of each other.
Okay.
In fact, Christopher's sister-in-law will later say that Chris was always, quote, the perfect gentleman with me, and my kids adored him, end quote.
Okay.
Well, he likes kids. There's a reason for that. Yeah.
Okay.
When Chris is around 17 years old in 1962, he and some other boys gang rape a girl at a beach in Sydney. They're arrested, and while he's in jail, according to the attorney, Clifford Brown, who represented him, quote, something happened to him there, end quote. He won't spend but a few days in jail. He pleads guilty to carnal knowledge and got 1 year probation along with court-ordered therapy. And as part of his probation, this court-ordered therapy included electroshock treatments.
Oh, really? Wow. That's severe.
That's called foreshadowing.
Uh-oh. Here we go. Already.
Yeah, already. It's early in the game. There's like a couple back-to-back we've had early foreshadowing. Now, there are those who believe this shock treatment did not help him in any way. Instead, it made his violent sexual tendencies worse. Now, Chris loved the book The Collector by John Fowles. And this is about a man who keeps a woman, he's a psychotic guy, lonely, keeps a woman in his basement against her will until she dies.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. It was released in 1963 when Chris is 18 years old, and he will love this book so much that he has nearly memorized the entire thing.
Okay. That's really foreshadowing.
Yeah. Creepy, right?
Wow.
Creepy. In 1968, when he's 23, Chris gets married in Australia. This marriage isn't going to last very long. You want to know how long?
30 minutes?
1 week.
I wasn't far off.
You weren't. It lasts 1 week.
Wow.
His new wife found another woman's panties and pornographic photos in Chris's car.
Wow.
That's a honeymoon for you.
That's not a way to start off a marriage.
Yeah. She accuses him of sexual abuse, saying that Chris had kinky sexual habits, and he even says that Chris tries to kill her.
Oh, wow.
In their 1 week of marriage, he tried to kill her.
He's a busy man.
Yeah. So kinky, another woman's panties, laid hands on her trying to kill her.
Wow.
It's a good reason to get divorced after a week.
Yeah.
I see it. I see it. Okay.
I see a divorce in their near future.
Yeah. And 1 week later, she's gone.
Yeah.
Now, a year later, in November of 1968, Chris used some nude photos to extort sex from a student nurse. And she complained to the police, but the charges are dropped because she doesn't want to testify in court.
Yeah.
And after this, he up and moves to the United States.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And he can do this because his father is an American citizen and Chris has dual citizenship.
Oh, okay.
And even though he spent half of his life in Australia, he does not have an Australian accent. He's not Crocodile Dundee. So that's not going to win him any points with the American girls.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
American women love an accent. What can I say?
That's not a knife.
That's a knife.
Okay, Crocodile Dundee. But when he arrives in the United States, he's 24, and he goes to live in Loxahatchee, Florida, a rural community that's just 15 miles west of Palm Beach. And this is where he'll get into the construction business. And he's going to make a ton of money. And I mean a boatload of money.
Oh, wow.
He forms Sawtell Construction Company and Sawtell Electric Corporation of Boynton Beach, both named after the town where his parents live in Australia.
Okay.
And these businesses are wildly successful. And he buys a huge house at 933 Mission Hill Road. It's a bachelor pad with a swimming pool and a jacuzzi. And in his garage is his black Porsche 911, a car he liked to race,
Wow.
and a Cadillac Eldorado.
Nice. Wow. He made some moolah.
I just picture this being all black leather and some, leopard skin, something on the floor.
I see some big chains around his neck, too.
I don't know about that, but he is that vibe for sure.
Yeah.
He gets himself a speedboat. He ties it to his private dock. He has 3 English setters, all show dogs. He's making a fortune in real estate, and he begins to develop an interest in photography.
Okay.
He buys lots of high-end cameras and equipment for his new hobby. He's going to photograph beautiful women.
Of course he is.
Now, Chris's neighbors said there were lots of beautiful women who came and went from his sprawling beach house. And Chris is a decent enough looking guy. He had ice blue eyes, a muscular build. He was personable and friendly with strangers. And his neighbors liked him, but they had no idea he has a record as a sex offender in 2 different countries. He was smooth. Quote, he could talk you out of your socks and you wouldn't miss him for a week. End quote. That was one of his neighbors.
Wow.
He was handsome. He was well-tailored. He acquired 6 parcels of Palm Beach County real estate worth nearly $400,000. He liked to ski in Vail. He liked to race cars. And he finished 17th in the Miami Grand Prix.
Wow.
And then Chris Wilder goes on the prowl.
Okay.
So he's this successful business guy. Everybody loves him. He could take your socks and you wouldn't miss them. Yeah. March 17th, 1971, he's arrested in Pompano Beach for disturbing the peace because he tried to persuade girls on the beach to pose nude. He is fined $25.
Okay.
In
What's the point?
Yeah, right? Right. Yeah. In 1974, he convinces a young girl to come back to the bachelor pad under the promise of giving her a modeling contract. Instead, he drugged and raped her. In 1976, he's arrested for allegedly forcing a 16-year-old girl to perform oral sex on him in the front seat of his pickup truck in Boca Raton.
Man.
He tells her that he will beat her if she doesn't. He is jailed a second time, but he'll be acquitted the next year.
Okay.
So you're talking about his 9 lives?
Yeah.
Yeah. Either like the 3 he had as a kid, but now he's got him as an adult too.
Do we know why he was acquitted?
I think it's just because the girls don't want to testify.
Oh,
This is
okay,
the
makes sense.
70s,
Yeah.
you know, it's still the 70s and yeah.
Makes sense.
I mean, we weren't making the same money that you guys were making. Some of us still aren't.
I wasn't making any money in this film.
I'm just speaking women in general. Women in general. And he thinks of them as objects to collect.
I was still asking my dad for 69 cents for a gallon of gas.
Then 6 years later, on October 4th, 1977, Chris offers to drive a Boca Raton girl to a job interview, but instead he drove her to a secluded field and allegedly raped her. He'll be acquitted, but will later admit that he did it to his psychiatrist, a sex therapist.
Wow.
Then on June 21st, 1980, Chris spiked a teenage girl's pizza with LSD and raped her in Palm Beach County, Florida. He still isn't going to jail. He gets 5 years probation after pleading guilty to reduced charges. And he tells the police that he's suffering, quote, blackouts. It's not my fault.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah.
Isn't that what every criminal says? You know, I don't remember. I blacked out.
No, some of them are really proud of what they do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But I'm not saying that he's not psychotic enough to be that way, too.
Yeah.
The arresting officer in Palm Beach County, the sheriff's detective, his name is Arthur Newcomb, and he gets Chris to explain his MO with these young women and the young girls. And Chris tells Detective Newcomb that he posed as a fashion photographer, and then he promised them national magazine exposure. And other times, he would have a South Florida modeling agency and talent agencies send models to his house on Mission Road Hill, where he's built himself a photo studio and a darkroom. He's really pulling it all together.
Yeah. Listen, my dad was a professional photographer. That's what he did.
Yes, he was.
And this guy's given photographers a bad name.
He's given men a bad name.
Jeez.
2 years later, December 28th, 1982, he's visiting his family in Australia, something that violates his probation from his 1980 rape in the United States. He kidnaps 2 15-year-old girls from a beach in New South Wales. He strips them. He photographs them nude in a seedy hotel in Sydney's red light district.
Wow.
He's charged with kidnapping and sexual assault, and after he's traced through the plate number on his rented car, his parents and his uncle bail him out of jail to the tune of 400,000 American dollars. And he's allowed to go back to Florida to await trial.
Wow.
And then there are all these delays in the court system, and a hearing date was finally set for April of 1984. Chris will never make it back to Australia for that hearing.
Wow. He just yeeted on out of Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just get $400,000 from my family. I'm off.
Yeah.
1983, Florida. He abducts 2 girls, ages 10 and 12, at gunpoint. He forced them to perform oral sex on him in a nearby forest, but he's still trying to lure women back to his house to pose for him, and then he would try to assault them. He did try to date. In fact, he had a girlfriend. I'm going to use that term very loosely because
I would say
very loosely. Well, I think the relationship was lopsided.
Yeah.
And Chris was the one who was really in love.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was the one who cared about her.
Wow.
Now, for what purpose? It's hard to say.
Sure.
But meet 23-year-old Elizabeth Ann Kenyon. She goes by Beth. Born on January 11th, 1961, she was a special ed teacher and a part-time model from North Miami Beach.
Okay.
She has a sister, Stacy, and she has a half-sister, Rosita. This woman is beautiful, and she was a former finalist in the Miss Florida pageant.
Oh, wow.
And Chris wanted to marry Beth. He told her he could move them both to Australia and they would live in luxury. But Beth only wanted to be friends.
Yeah.
She friend-zoned Chris.
Bummer, dude.
In a big way.
Sorry, man.
Now, after this, he had trouble dating. So he decided to join a dating service. And this is the early 80s, so no swiping right or left.
Yeah.
You had to make a videotape of yourself.
Remember those.
You remember this?
Oh, yeah.
And on Chris's tape, he tells of his need to develop a steady relationship, and he even described the kind of woman he was looking for, and it was Beth. He's talking about Beth.
Wow.
Yeah. Quote, I want to date and enjoy the company of women with depth. I'm looking for a long-term relationship, but not marriage, end quote. Now, in the early 80s, late 70s, if you said you were looking for a long-term relationship but not marriage, I mean, I think all the women are going to be like, yeah, no.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on this dating site for a reason.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Soon after, Chris Wilder's killing spree begins. February 25th, 1984, Chris races in the Miami Grand Prix. Remember, he likes to race.
Right.
Although the racing commission will later say that they didn't really know him and he didn't have many friends on the race circuit, which is pretty convenient knowing the story. I mean, in hindsight, they're like, we don't know him. We don't know him.
We had nothing to do with him.
Nothing to see here. Yeah. But the day after the race, on February 26th, a model hired for the race, her name is Rosario Gonzalez. She was actually hired as a promotional gig. She's handing out aspirin.
Aspirin?
She's handing out aspirin. That's what I read.
Was that like a marketing thing?
Yeah, it was a marketing thing. She was a model and she was doing a promotional appearance.
I guess you could hand out drugs in the 80s, huh?
Well, I guess you could hand out aspirin. You know, I was at a medical conference one time and I heard this doctor speak, and he actually said if aspirin was developed today, or this was probably 30 years ago, but if it had been developed, now, it would have been one of the most controlled substances.
Really? Why'd he say that?
I mean, just because it's a panacea. It cures a lot of things. Headache, aspirin.
Wow.
Aches and pains, aspirin.
Wow.
Need to thin your blood?
Yeah.
Aspirin.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's what Rosario Gonzalez is doing. She's handing out promotional aspirin.
Okay.
And she is last seen walking away with Chris. He returns to his home in Palm Beach after this race. And then on March 5th, Beth Kenyon, the girl he asked to marry him, also goes missing.
Oh, no.
She vanishes after work from the school where she teaches in Coral Gables. Her parents go to the police and say, look, something's not right. Something is up. She's very responsible. And when police say, look, she's an adult. She hasn't been gone all that long.
Right.
Her parents hire Ken Whitaker and his son, Ken Jr., private detectives, to look into their daughter's disappearance. They weren't waiting around.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, 48 hours wasn't out yet.
Wow.
But they were like, our daughter is not going to be on one of these shows.
Yeah. And two, I mean, a parent knows more than anything.
Well, yeah, she was very responsible.
Sure.
She was a very responsible girl.
Yeah.
Woman. She's 23.
Yeah.
But they bring Ken and Ken a photo album and an address book. That's what they've taken from Beth's apartment. It's all they have.
Okay.
And in the photo album are a couple of pictures of Chris Wilder.
There you go.
And they tell the Kens, I'm going to call them the Kens because it's Ken and Ken, but they tell the Kens that he asked her to marry him and she said no. So the private detective starts looking into Chris. And what Ken and Ken discover is that there was another woman who's gone missing and she was at the Grand Prix racetrack. So they go to some of the drivers and show a photo of Chris and they say, yeah, he was with Rosario Gonzalez that day.
We know that guy.
Yeah. And these women only have one thing in common. I mean, this is a marketing model who's handing out aspirin and a beautiful girl who is in the Miss Florida pageant who works with special needs kids.
Right.
And the one thing they have in common is Chris Wilder.
Okay.
So Ken and Ken go to the police with this information.
Okay.
And when the police question Chris on the phone, they call him up. He's cool as a cucumber.
Yeah.
On March 11th, he talks with some of his neighbors who say he seemed just fine. And his 39th birthday is coming up on March 13th, and he decides to treat himself. He buys himself a 1973 Chrysler. But after this, the police say they want to come by his house and chat. But when they show up, at the time Chris says, yeah, come on over. Nobody's there.
He's gone.
He is gone. Come on by.
There's a surprise.
Yeah. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Yeah.
What they do find is a photograph in the trash, and it's a photograph from the Florida Grand Prix where he placed 17th and won $400. So it puts him at the same place as a missing Rosario Gonzalez. Now, at this point, Beth Kenyon's parents go to the FBI, and Special Agent John Hammond of the Violent Crimes Unit out of Miami is looking into the case. Now, he can't really start a case because they don't have a body,
Sure.
and it's the FBI. I mean, nobody's been taken over state lines.
Right.
But it's March 12th, and they don't have any evidence that Chris has really done anything.
Okay.
They look him up and see his record and know, okay, this guy is perfectly capable of doing something.
Yeah, because they've got the record that he's a sex offender, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he keeps getting acquitted.
Okay.
So he's got a rap sheet and a mugshot.
Okay.
So to rattle Chris's cage a little bit, Rob's going to love this. Ken and Ken Whitaker go to the press, and they have them run an article stating that one of the drivers was being sought in connection with the disappearance of Rosario Gonzalez. Now, they don't call him Chris. They don't call him out by name, but they do say he's a contractor from Australia.
Oh.
And everybody knew who that was.
That pretty much narrows it down.
That's Chris Wilder.
Yeah.
March 15th, Chris stays not at his house, but at a Howard Johnson's, a Hojo's in Daytona Beach. I probably stayed at that Hojo's for spring break one year.
Thanks, Howard Johnson.
Yeah.
No problem, Howard Johnson.
I don't even think there are Howard Johnsons anymore out there. I don't think there are any Hojo's.
Reminds me of Blazing Saddle.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's funny. That's right.
I agree with what Howard Johnson said.
Dr. Samuel Johnson's right about Olson Johnson's being right.
But this hotel is near the airport. He checks out early on the 16th, and that day he is seen in Boynton Beach by his business partner at 10 a.m., and later that night, Chris is spotted at a party for the SS Royale at Port Canaveral. Then he goes home and he packs his panties, he packs his suitcase, and he tells his business partner that he is, quote, in trouble, end quote, and that he's leaving town.
Yeah.
See, I'm blowing this popsicle stand, making like a shepherd, getting the flock out. My mother always said that.
Nice.
And he also said, quote, I am not going to jail. I am not going to do it, end quote.
So he's pretty much admitting that he's guilty of this stuff.
He kind of is.
Yeah.
And he's also saying, but I'm going on the run.
Yeah.
I'm not going to jail.
Going on the lam.
Yeah. And I think he's got a little PTSD from Australia, his very first jail visit after the gang rape when they did shock treatment on him.
Sure. Yeah.
He's not going back to jail. Now, on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, Chris checks his 3 dogs into a kennel and he leaves town. Now, by this time, as some of his friends say, he was extremely nervous and distraught. He was looking for alibis and even crying to one friend about the pressure of it all and that he didn't want to go to jail. And don't forget, he's just a couple weeks away from going back to Australia to stand trial for the kidnapping and sexual assault of the 2 15-year-old girls he stripped and photographed naked at the hotel.
This isn't looking good for Chris.
It's not looking good. He could face up to 14 years of prison on those charges in Australia alone. And on top of this, May 7th was the day he was supposed to go to court over his probation violation when he went to Australia in the first place in 1982 because he was on probation for a 1980 assault. Chris is a busy man.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Yep.
I mean, you need a day timer to keep up with this guy.
Yeah, get the Chris Daytimer for $19.95. You get a free set of Ginsu knives with it.
On sale right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, he's busy. Busier than a moth in a mitten, right?
Yep.
March 19th, 1984, 10 a.m. Chris goes to a Tampa bank and cashes checks totaling $19,000.
Whoa.
And the bank photos confirm that's him in the drive-thru. There's Chris.
Yep.
March 20th, 1984. Linda Gruber, a 19-year-old Florida State University co-ed, disappears from Governor Square Mall in Tallahassee in the afternoon. And this is what he does. Quote, "Excuse me, I'm a fashion photographer looking for a fresh new face for an assignment I'm doing for a major magazine."
Wow.
Yeah. "I think you're just the one I'm looking for." He offers her $25 an hour to pose for him. She tells him she's not interested in modeling, but he lures her in broad daylight to his car to show her his portfolio.
Okay.
He has a large diamond ring on the pinky finger of his left hand, a gold watch on his wrist, and he's using a Pentax camera. It's hanging around his shoulder. He looked very confident. He looked very professional and successful. He looked very respectable. And she thinks she's safe because it's the parking lot. It's busy.
Right.
It's in the middle of the afternoon. But Chris gets her close to the car. He punches her in the stomach. Then he knocks her in the head and stuffs her in the car. She wakes up and they're on a rural road. So he pulls over and yanks her out of the car and tosses her in the trunk. Then he strangles her while she's in the trunk until she passes out. Then he binds her hands with clothesline before wrapping her in a blanket.
Wow.
He drives all the way to Georgia with Linda in his trunk. He's duct taped her eyes shut, and he's told her, "I've got a recorder in the trunk, and if I hear you even make a peep, quote, I'll know about it, and it won't be good for you," end quote.
Wow.
Now, that night in a hotel room, he tied her to the bed, he raped her, he glued her eyes shut with super glue,
Wow.
and he tortured her by applying copper wires to her feet and passing an electrical current through the wire.
Oh, my God.
He was shocking her like he had been given electroshock therapy. Yeah, after that gang rape on the beach.
Wow.
After being raped and tortured, she actually gets out of his grip. She escapes him and she runs to the bathroom where she locks herself in. They're in this hotel room.
Yeah.
She locks the door to the bathroom and she starts banging on the walls, causing a huge ruckus.
Good for her.
Help me, I'm in here. And Chris is like, "Shut up. What are you doing? Shut up."
Yep.
And then he gets afraid. Yeah. He's afraid he's going to be caught. Yeah. So he leaves.
Yeah, because, hotel bathroom doors, the majority of them, you can't break those things down.
Well, and they don't make them like they used to. That's what my dad always says. I'm sure that was a real door and not just like a sliding glass door or something you see in some of the hotels today.
Yep.
And after she makes this big commotion, she's found in this Bainbridge, Georgia motel room that night.
Okay.
And they show photos of Chris to Linda, and she positively IDs him. Now, Linda lives. She's going to go on to have kids, and she earns her PhD.
Oh, good.
Now the FBI has a kidnapping and assault, and he has crossed state lines, and the hunt is on. But boy, let me tell you now, this is going to be a long hunt.
Oh, really?
It's been 84 years.
Yeah. The FBI shows up at his house. Of course, he's long gone.
Sure.
But But they can't even lift a fingerprint in his entire bachelor pad
Really?
because the whole place has been wiped clean.
And it was a big joint.
It's a big place. Not one fingerprint did they lift.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's your house. If you live in a house, your fingerprints are everywhere. Yeah. Not one fingerprint.
Gee whiz. No, wait, did they check the Skippy peanut butter? That would have been the first thing that you should check if you were looking for mine.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm kidding.
March 21st, 1984, Chris abducts Terry Ferguson. She was a beautiful 21-year-old aspiring model whose stepdad is a local police chief.
Okay.
She left a note for her mom before she left their Indian Harbor Beach home. To go out that afternoon, she was meeting her friends at the Merritt Square Mall.
Okay.
And she asks her mother in the note to, quote, wake me up at 10, love Terry, end quote. Now, her stepfather found her car parked at the mall, and witnesses stated that they saw Terry leave the mall with a well-dressed, balding man who fits Chris's description. Then on March 23rd, her father's notified by the police that a body had been found face down in a snake-infested swamp about 100 miles east of their home.
Okay.
She's spotted by a utility worker who's up on a pole. She's found in a Haines City swamp at Canaveral Groves, where Chris's car had been pulled out just days earlier. Terry had been beaten with a tire iron, and her hands and feet and neck were bound by rope.
Wow.
It's about this same time that the police and the FBI start piecing together half a dozen rapes, tortures, and murders, and a massive manhunt ensues because they're looking for Chris Wilder.
Sure.
March 22nd, 1984, Chris approaches a woman in Beaumont, Texas. He's on the move. He's in a mall. Her name is Terry Diane Walden. He flashes a business card as a photographer, but Terry doesn't bite. You know, his whole, I want to make you a model. Terry's like, not today, Satan.
Yeah.
Not today, Satan.
Yeah. Go away, dude.
Yeah. That night, Chris checks into a hotel in Winnie, Texas, checks out the next day. And then the following day on March 23rd, the exact same 23-year-old Terry Walden, she's a Lamar University nursing student. She's a wife. She's a mother of two. She's abducted from the Beaumont, Texas mall.
Really?
She's gone back again after she drops off her 4-year-old daughter at daycare. And her plan is to pick up a couple things, then go study with a friend, then pick up their 4-year-old daughter at daycare. And she was supposed to be home around 1:30 that afternoon. But at 5 o'clock, the daycare notified her husband that Terry never came to pick up their daughter. And her husband is immediately concerned, and he filed a missing person report because his wife, Terry, told him about the creepy guy who followed her through the mall the day before and asked her to model. Wow. Chris actually grabbed her in the middle of a busy parking lot in broad daylight. This is the same thing all over again. He knocks her unconscious and he pushes her into his own car.
Jeez.
Then he transfers license plates from the car he's been driving, a Chrysler, to Terry's Mercury Cougar, and he drives away with her in her own car. Her body will be found floating in a canal near Beaumont, Texas. Just a few days later, she was bound and stabbed to death. They find Chris's Chrysler just a few miles away from the body, and FBI forensics search the car and they glean hair and fibers that match Teresa Ferguson, the girl found by the utility worker. So now they know that she's the fourth victim of Chris.
Right.
March 24th, Chris is identified as a man who approached a woman at a Dallas mall. So he's moved from Beaumont to Dallas. He's unsuccessful there too. And that night he checks into an Oklahoma City area hotel. Meanwhile, the FBI knows we're a couple days behind this guy.
Sure.
And that's really worrisome because he seems to be abducting and murdering women as he travels. Right. They put out an all-points bulletin on Terry's Cougar, and they never know what license plate Chris has used. So every field office in the country gets Chris Wilder's information, a profile on him, and where they think he might be going. It's not going to help. I'm just telling you now, it's not going to help. The only way they can track him is to follow his trail of dead women and bodies. That's how they're tracking him, not by anything else. which is so scary.
Yeah.
March 25th, Suzanne Logan disappears from Oklahoma City in a shopping center, the Penn Square Mall. She disappears in broad daylight in the afternoon, and the next day, March 26th, Suzanne's body is found near a lake in Junction City, Kansas, by a fisherman.
Wow, he's just all over the place.
All over the place. Oh. They know it's the work of Chris Wilder. Suzanne is found partially clothed, raped, stabbed, and bound with a nylon cord and duct tape. She was found less than an hour after Chris murdered her. He'd cut her hair, and it was later found in a trash can by a hotel maid.
Did you ever find out why he did that?
No,
Wow.
But this is the same day that Terry Walden's body is found. So they're finding multiple bodies on the same day, hundreds of miles apart.
He's just on a rampage.
He is. Wow. And like I said, they're going to be behind him the whole time.
Right.
Also on March 26th, Chris checks into a Rifle, Colorado motel near Denver using a Visa card that belonged to his business partner in Florida. L.K. Kimbrell was on the credit card.
Okay.
The FBI can finally trace him a little bit. There's no instant validation on a credit card in 1984. Believe it or not, they only called a phone number at Visa if the purchase was over $100.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So today you buy, a soft drink and a $1 pack of gum or whatever.
Excuse me, Mr. Potterworth. We have somebody that purchased a Snickers bar. It was an extra large, so we wanted to check and make sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to be over $100. Yeah. And Chris knows this. So he's picking these small, cheap hotels, never even close to $100, always between $50 and $60. But this particular desk clerk, he decides to call in the number for approval. Maybe he didn't like the way Chris looked.
Right.
Maybe he just thought it was a little hinky. Maybe there's a guardian angel whispering in his ear.
Yeah, I'll go with the latter.
Yeah, but when he calls, he doesn't get the approval. And the person on the other end of the phone at Visa said, you need to call this number immediately.
Oh, really?
Immediately.
And that number was?
Well, it's the FBI, but they get in touch with the Denver, Colorado field office, and they go operational. But they're not going to get there until 2 days later.
What?
And by then, he is long gone.
Why did it take him 2 days?
Don't know. I'm telling you, they always seem to be a day late and a dollar short. Yeah. March 27th, he checks into another motel just 2 miles away in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. March 28th, he moves to a hotel in Denver, Colorado. Now, it's been 3 weeks, and he's abducted 4 women and murdered 3 of them.
Jeez.
But they're noticing that he's moving west and he's really focusing on the shopping malls. So they notify all the shopping malls across the country, all the mall cops. So Paul Blart, the mall cop.
I was about ready to ring up Paul Blart.
He's on the lookout. Yeah. He's on the lookout for Chris.
Nice segue.
Yes. They gave them posters, they gave them flyers, and they gave them information. If you see this guy, you call us. The following day, March 29th, 18-year-old Cheryl Lynn Bonaventura disappears from the Mesa Shopping Center in Grand Junction, Colorado. She had been excitedly packing for a trip in Aspen with her best friend, Crystal. She was dressed in faded jeans, gold-toed cowboy boots. Cheryl told her mother that she was going to the mall before meeting up with Crystal to leave for Aspen. And her mother asked her to be careful driving, and she said, quote, "Mom, you worry too much," end quote.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, Mom, we do. Moms worry.
Yeah.
Sorry, can't help it. But her car will be found at the mall, and locked inside are her sunglasses. And after a missing person report was made, witnesses at the local mall identified Chris, who was soliciting several women, offering a modeling contract. Yeah.
Yeah, jeez.
Then Chris is seen at dinner with her in Silverton, where he told their waitress that they were headed to Las Vegas. And that same day, he checks into a Durango, Colorado hotel with an unidentified woman under the names of Mr. and Mrs. L.K. Kimbrell. That's his business partner's name.
Yeah.
March 30th, Chris registers at a motel in Page, Arizona, again using the names of Mr. and Mrs. L.K. Kimbrell. March 31st, Chris has landed in Vegas where he checks into another hotel under his partner's name again. Chris will stab and shoot Cheryl, killing her before dumping her body 12 miles north of Kanab, Utah.
Wow.
She's not going to be found until May 3rd. The next day, April Fool's Day, April 1st, Chris is using his real name and he checks out of a motel at 10:30 a.m.
He's using his real name?
On this one he does.
Wow.
And then he checks into another local hotel. He's probably paying cash using his $19,000.
Right.
Then Chris attends a beauty pageant at a local mall. He's going to approach 3 different girls, telling them to meet him later at Caesar's Palace. At 4:30 p.m. on April 1st, 1984, the Meadows Mall, Las Vegas, Michelle Korfman, a 17-year-old girl, is participating in a preliminary 17 magazine beauty pageant at the mall.
Okay.
This means every pretty girl
Yeah.
in the world, because 17 was a huge thing in 1984. I used to get a subscription of it.
It's like a smorgasbord for Chris Wilder.
It is.
Jeez.
It is. Yes. He's not missing this opportunity. He talked to a bunch of the girls, but he really liked Michelle. She wasn't from Las Vegas. She had driven there from her parents' home in Boulder City, Nevada. And she's at the mall alone because she told her family they would only make her nervous. But when she's finished, Chris approaches her about modeling for him. She changes her clothes and she leaves the mall with Chris Wilder. As soon as it's known that a girl from the mall left with a man who looked like Chris Wilder, Paul Blart, where are you? FBI agents respond and they show up, but they are too late. Yeah. They ask for all the photographs that anybody's taken at the fashion show. Mm-hmm. If you've got film, they want it. And they're looking for Chris in the crowd. Sure. And a photographer hands over on the spot 5 rolls of film that he has taken.
Wow.
And when they go through these prints, they find Chris watching Michelle Korfman on the runway.
Wow.
Now, I've seen an interview with the FBI, and they said this was the look of a, quote, homicidal maniac, end quote. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. It's creepy for sure. But I think that they think he's a homicidal maniac because they already know that he's a homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he gets Michelle to his car, he binds and gags her with duct tape. Then he beat her, he raped her, and he tortured her. He cut her, not enough to kill her, but just enough to inflict pain. And finally, he murdered her.
Jeez.
Michelle's body will be found on May 13th at a Southern California rest stop near the Angeles National Forest. April 3rd, Chris uses his partner, Mr. Kimbrell's name again, and checks into a suburban Los Angeles motel. He's all the way in LA now. Checking out the next morning, in and out. The next day, April 4th, Tina Marie Rosico, age 16, of Lomita, California, disappears from the Del Amo Fashion Center.
Okay.
She's there to apply for a summer job. She wanted to work that summer so she could save up and buy a car. All of these kids are so innocent. It's just crazy. Chris approaches her and says that she is perfect for a modeling gig he needs to shoot. And he offers her $100 in cash and tells her there's a lot more where this comes from if you'll pose for me. And she agrees to being photographed. And he drives her to a nearby park. And in the beginning, it seemed like a real job. He's talking to her about how the natural light is the best and the pond in the distance is perfect for what he wants. And she's taking direction from him. He tells her to smile, to tilt her head. She's following all of his orders. Sure. Then out of the blue, he points a gun in her face, a .357 Magnum, and he forces her to get in his car. And he drives her to El Centro, about 2 hours east of San Diego, where he beats her, ties her to the bed, and rapes her repeatedly.
Wow.
He cut her as well and also electrocuted her by tying copper wires to different parts of her body. Wow. Now, he's about to end Tina's life when he sees a news story on TV about him. That he lures women in shopping malls under the guise of being a modeling scout and a photographer. They talk about the facts of the case and that Chris is responsible for the disappearance now of 6 young women. And they show his photo and they talk about the fact that he is on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Wow.
How would you like to see that?
Yeah.
You're watching TV.
You're just watching
hey,
TV.
Look, it's me.
Yeah, but he's watching TV and he's got a girl tied to the bed.
Jeez.
And he sees this.
Wow.
And Chris Wilder, he's not number 10 on the list. He is number 1.
Numero uno.
He's public enemy number 1. He has murdered 5 of the 6 women he's abducted, and number 7's in the hotel room with him, Tina Rizzico. So he panics. He starts gathering everything from the hotel room, including young Tina, and throws it all into the car, and they're on the move. And I just want to say, Guardian Angels again, I think the reason that he saw himself on TV, it gave her a chance to live. Yeah. Now, after he sees the big FBI production, he knows he can't use his old MO anymore. The jig is up because Chris's face is on the front of every newspaper in America. And they're talking about him on the national and the local news channels each and every night. And the FBI is holding out hope that if they blanket the country with this man's face, he's going to have a really hard time showing it anywhere. They want someone somewhere to see this asshat. And I mean, it's the largest manhunt in the United States history to this point.
Really?
It's the largest manhunt by the FBI to this point, 1984. Wow. But Chris thinks Tina can help him. He thinks, quote, she's robotic enough, end quote, to help him lure other victims. He can't do it, so he keeps her alive to do it. So he keeps her alive. He takes her to Taos, New Mexico. They're in the car together, and he tells her, I'm going to let you go on one condition. You have to help me find another girl just like you to take your place.
Gee whiz.
Now, she's just a kid, so before anybody judges her, she's been beaten, she's been raped, she's been electrocuted, and he's going to keep her with him for days. 2 days later, Chris uses his partner, Mr. Kimbrell's Texaco credit card at a gas station in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The tag on the car was New Mexico. This car was reported as stolen on April 3rd. Chris stole it while he was in Las Vegas.
Gotcha.
Then for some reason, nobody seems to be able to figure out, while he was so close to Mexico and this close to leaving the country, instead he drives to Gary, Indiana.
What?
Yeah.
Of all places.
Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana. Yeah, he goes to Gary, Indiana.
Wow.
April 10th, 1984, Dawnette Sue Wilt, age 16, disappears after applying for a job at South Lake Mall in Merrillville, Indiana. Tina helps Chris lure Dawnette. She tells Dawnette that she's a store manager and she wants her to fill out a job application in Chris's car.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
A 16-year-old store manager, and you got to sign it in this guy's car.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds viable.
And Dawnette follows Tina. I mean, why wouldn't she? She's just a kid like Dawnette. Yeah. And when they reach the car, Chris pulls out his .357 Magnum and forces them both to get into the car. Witnesses will see him leave with both Dawnette and Tina in the car. Chris bound and gagged Dawnette with duct tape. And for the first several hours, Chris raped her in the back seat while Tina was ordered to drive east to New York.
Wow. These poor girls.
Yeah. And because the FBI knows he's Indiana, they're thinking he's heading east this time. He's gone all the way west. Now he's going all the way east. Right. Every available FBI agent east of the Mississippi is now working on this case.
Okay.
But he's not letting Tina go free like he promised. He forces her to watch him rape and torture Dawnette Wilt. And this is going to go on for 2 days. Yeah. And while it's happening, Tina sees her mother on television begging for her to come home.
Wow.
And this makes Chris panic again. He packs all 3 of them up, and when they're in Barrington, New York, near Rochester, Chris tells Tina not to move and takes Dawnette into the woods. She's been plied with sleeping meds, but he's making her walk into the woods with him. Tina thinks about leaving Chris there in the woods, but I don't think she wanted to leave Dawnette too. So she's sitting in the car, and he's like taking the other 16-year-old girl, Dawnette, out into the woods. Right. But Tina's a broken little kid at this point. Sure. She's been with him almost 9 days, and he's subjected her to so many horrible things. She doesn't leave the car, nor does she drive off with the car either.
Wow.
Chris is in the woods with Dawnette. It's at this point Dawnette knows he's going to kill me.
Right.
And this 16-year-old girl begs him to shoot her and not stab her. So remember, he's been torturing her.
Sure.
And she's thinking, this is the end. This is it. And so she says, please just shoot me. I can't handle the torture any longer.
Right.
But he laughed in her face, and he attempted to suffocate her before he stabbed her twice in the chest, and he left her for dead. Now, he gets back in the car with Tina, and he drives off, and then suddenly he stops because he's worried Dawnette might still be alive. He probably should have shot her like she asked.
Right.
So he puts the car in reverse and pulls to the side of the road again, and he tells Tina, don't get out of the car. And he goes back to look for Dawnette so he can kill her by shooting her.
Right.
But Dawnette is gone.
There you go. Good job, Dawnette.
She survived his attack, and before he could come back for her, she dragged that little 16-year-old body away from where he had left her.
Good.
Yeah. It's just crazy. Wow. It's now April 12th. Chris uses his partner's Texaco card again in Buffalo, New York. So they're still tracking him, but they haven't caught up with him. Right. And he still has Tina in the car with him. Later that day, Dawnette, who was left for dead in the woods near Rochester, she's found walking along a road near Barrington, New York by Charles Larson, who drove her to the hospital. Wow. After being stabbed and abandoned by Chris, she's walking by herself down the road. She's looking for help.
I can't believe she didn't bleed out.
Well, she suffered from severe trauma and blood loss, but she manages to tell the police before they can do anything, before they even treat her. She manages to tell the police that Chris is driving a Mercury Cougar, Terry Walden's car, and he's heading for Canada with Tina in tow. Wow. So that same day, April 12th, Chris drives to the nearest mall in Victor, New York. And Chris forces Tina to persuade a woman named Beth Dodge, who is 33 years old and lives in Phelps, New York, to come closer to their car. Like, Miss, she's a 16-year-old. Can you come here, please?
Yeah, reminds me of Silence of the Lambs.
Kind of, exactly.
I need help with my couch. Sorry.
That's just nightmares. Every time I hear Tom Petty sing American Girl.
Rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and the girl's like beating on her steering wheel and she's singing. And that's exactly what I do when I hear that song. And then she tries to be a good person.
I did a film with Ted Levine and I actually got to...
Yes, you did. And I got to meet him. He's very nice.
We happened to be in North Carolina and they were shooting down there and we went on set and it was such a sweet guy.
He's very nice.
But just looking at him every time, it's like, I broke my arm and I need help with the couch.
Yeah, well, that's not the one that I think of. I always think of the other one where he's looking at himself in the mirror. Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
But we really got off subject here. Really got off subject. But it is true. He's using the same sort of Buffalo Bill. Yeah. Can you help me? Can you come to the car? Yeah. But when she does, Chris forces Beth into her car, which is a gold Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. He sticks a gun to her head. He takes her car keys. He's carjacked her. And now he has Tina follow him in the Cougar because he needs a new car. Yeah. Dawnette could be anywhere telling the authorities what he's driving, where he's headed, what his plan is. So after a short 30-minute drive to a secluded area, Chris shoots Beth in the back and dumps her body in a gravel pit along a rural road near Victor, New York. Again, why didn't Tina just drive away in the Cougar? Why didn't she drive for help? Why didn't she drive anywhere? Mm-hmm. She doesn't. Right. And I'm sure she thought, he's going to kill me if I don't do exactly what he wants, because that's what he's been saying the whole time.
Especially after you've been traumatized and tortured and raped.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oof. She takes all of Chris's stuff from Terry Walden's car and puts it in Beth Dodge's Firebird. And then Tina can hear Chris murdering Beth in the woods. This woman was murdered just for her car. Then Chris drives Tina to Logan Airport in Boston. He buys her a plane ticket and she flies back to Los Angeles.
Really?
Yes.
He let her go.
He let her go.
Wow.
And he says to her, I don't want you around when the end comes.
Wow.
So he became attached to her. Yeah, he became attached to her.
Right.
So she flies home. And when she gets home, she tells the FBI everything that's happened to her. And she too tells them that Chris is going to Canada. And the FBI had done enough digging to know that Chris had been to Canada a lot and that he had some friends there.
Okay.
So they think he's headed for the Canadian border.
Gotcha.
The next day is Friday the 13th. Chris tries to abduct another young woman after offering her a ride to a gas station, but she escapes. Then shortly after, while driving Beth's Trans Am, he stops for gas in Colebrook, New Hampshire, a tiny hamlet that's about 14 miles from the Canadian border.
Okay.
And while he's filling up the car, he chats up the service station attendant because, yes, young people listening to this podcast, there used to be people who came out and pumped your gas and washed your windows.
Yeah. It was an amazing time.
It was. And gas was 50 cents.
Yeah.
But Chris is as cool as a cucumber again. And he asks this attendant, what kind of paperwork am I going to need to cross over into Canada? Now, New Hampshire state troopers have been put on high alert that Chris could be in their area.
Right.
And troopers Wayne Fortier and Leo Jellison notice Chris at the gas station.
Oh.
They're undercover. I mean, they're dressed in plain clothes. These state troopers are.
Right.
And these two see Chris driving Beth Dodge's Trans Am. So the two troopers pull up and they kind of corner him and they say, "Can we talk for a sec?" And Chris reaches for the .357 Magnum and all hell is about to break loose.
Yeah.
Trooper Leo Jellison jumped onto Chris's back, and during the scuffle, Chris's gun went off, not once, but twice.
Oh, wow.
The first shot hit Chris and also went into Jellison's liver.
Ooh.
So the shot went through Chris and lodged in the state trooper's liver. The second shot was straight to Chris's heart, killing him instantly.
Yeah.
It was Chris who pulled the trigger on his own .357 Magnum.
Wow.
His death will be listed as a suicide.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Thankfully, Trooper Jellison, after some surgery and R&R, he fully recovered.
Good.
In the trunk are Chris Wilder's possessions: handcuffs, rolls of duct tape, a specially designed electrical cord used to torture his victims, a sleeping bag, another .357 revolver with ammunition, and a copy of The Collector, his favorite book.
Wow.
Meanwhile, in Fort Lauderdale, Chris's doppelganger gets arrested 3 times.
Oh, no.
3 different times.
How unfortunate to look like this guy.
Yes, poor William Dempsey, a balding 35-year-old, is in South Florida on vacation. And instead of fun in the sun, he was repeatedly hauled into the police station. And on the 3rd arrest, he said, quote, "Not again," quote.
This poor guy.
I know. They handcuffed him 3 times and took him to the station 3 times. And each time they ID'd him not as Chris through his fingerprints.
Wow.
Yeah. Can you imagine being on vacation and 3 different times you get picked up?
Yeah.
He's like, here we go again.
Oh, man.
I feel sorry for him.
Some people look like George Clooney. Some people look like,
Yep.
This guy looks like Chris
Mr.
Wilder.
Dempsey looked like Chris Wilder.
Oh, man. Bummer, dude.
Yeah. Well, Chris will be cremated in Florida, leaving behind a personal estate worth, how much you think he was worth?
Oh, man. $3 million.
$3 million. I can't believe you did that. On the money, baby.
I swear I don't know anything about this story.
He doesn't. He never knows any of them. Yeah. He murdered 8 women. These are his known victims on his killing spree from March to April of 1984. But he's been now linked to the disappearance and murder of several other women, including some whose remains were found in areas that Chris used to frequent. Australia also had a string of unsolved murders called the Wanda Beach murders that have been possibly linked to Chris. In 1965, Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sherrock accompanied a man that matched Chris's description into the dunes near Sydney. They were strangled, raped, and stabbed. Their bodies were found in a shallow grave. No one has ever been charged with their murders. In 1981, two teens, Mary Hare and Mary Optis, were taken from a mall in Lee County, Florida. Mary Hare was found later, stabbed to death, but Mary Optis' body has never been found. And another girl, a model and actress named Tammy Lynn Leppert, she disappeared at the age of 18. She was actually in a few movies. She had small parts, Scarface and a movie called Spring Break.
Wow. Yeah, I love Scarface. I do.
Say hello to my,
Say hello to my little friend.
Say hello to my little friend!
Yeah. Why can men always do the gun sounds so well? Maybe it's just something we weren't taught as girls.
It's a genetic thing.
Apparently. In July of 1982, after Tammy came home from a party, her demeanor had totally changed. And Tammy's mother said that her daughter thought someone was going to kill her. She was very paranoid.
Really?
July 6, 1983, Tammy and her friend Keith Roberts decided to drive to Cocoa Beach at about 11 in the morning. And Roberts would later tell the authorities that he and Tammy had an argument, and Tammy had requested that he drop her off. So Roberts tells the authorities he left her in the parking lot at Glass Bank near an Exxon gas station on State Road A1A in Cocoa Beach.
Okay.
No one will ever see Tammy again. Melody Gay, age 19, is taken while she's working the graveyard shift, an all-night shift, in a store in Collier County, Florida on March 7th, 1984. Her body is pulled from a rural canal 3 days later. And finally, March 19th, 1984, 15-year-old Colleen Osborne is skipping school to have a day at Daytona Beach. She will never return home. About 3 weeks after Colleen vanished, a fisherman found the body of the young girl buried in a shallow grave at a lake in Orange County. Now, for 27 years, Chris Wilder will be thought of as her abductor. But in 2001, Colleen's brother receives this letter, and in it, the author of the letter confesses to killing Colleen and dumping her body near Interstate 4.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't enough detail for police to conduct a search, and the letter was postmarked in Manchester, New Hampshire. And the writer claimed to be dying of cirrhosis of the liver, and he didn't sign his name. He signed it with the Christian symbol of a fish, like the outline.
Really?
Something that police believe is consistent with people who attend Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, in February of 2011, Colleen's body is actually identified using DNA testing. Her body had been found shortly after Colleen vanished, buried in this shallow grave. But for 30 years, the lower jaw of Colleen was stored at the Orange County Medical Examiner's office, and her case file sat in a closet.
Okay.
The little bit of bone and teeth, they sent it into the FBI laboratory for DNA testing in 2007 and finally received a hit. And it linked the bones that are discovered in Orange County in 1984 to the family of a missing Daytona Beach teenager who vanished that same time.
Oh, wow.
So the bones finally had a name, Colleen Osborne.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
The mitochondrial DNA was taken from the mandible, and it matched her sister's.
Wow.
So whether she was a victim of Chris Wilder or some man dying in New Hampshire, we will never know. But they do know that it is Colleen, so they can finally put her to rest.
Nice.
The bodies of Elizabeth Kenyon, Beth Kenyon, the one who turned down the marriage proposal, and Rosario Gonzalez, the model at the Grand Prix, they've never been found.
Really?
And Beth's parents died not knowing what happened to their daughter.
That's just horrible.
And back in Australia, Chris's family cannot believe that he's a killer. He's just the nicest guy. Now, nobody knows if the family got their $400,000 back from the Australian courts for Chris's bail money. Funny thing, though, following the autopsy on April 13th of Chris's body, Dr. Robert Christine, the pathologist who was in charge of the autopsy, gets a phone call from a man claiming to represent Harvard University. They wanted Chris Wilder's brain for study.
Oh, really?
They wanted to see if it was a defect or if it was a disease. They wanted to see which one of those had caused his killing spree. So Dr. Christie says, okay, look it, I'm going to need written word. I'm going to need a written request from Harvard School of Medicine. And he is still waiting for that written request today.
Really? So it wasn't
Yes.
Harvard?
It wasn't, because later a spokesman for Harvard's medical school said, "We never called."
Wow.
So all kinds of mystery around him.
Could there be more screwy things going on?
I
with
know. And who knows how many women he actually murdered.
This? Yeah.
But that is the story of Christopher Wilder, the collector. And that's all I have to say about that.
Wow. It sounds like Christopher Wilder, I mean, when he started on his killing spree, it was almost like he knew he was going to be going out, you know, in a blaze of glory.
I think when he saw himself as the FBI's #1 on the most wanted list,
Yeah.
he was like, oh,
And he just took...
I'm screwed, man. This is it.
He took off across the country. I think he just thought, you know what, I'm going to take out as many people or as many women as I possibly can before...
I head to Canada.
Yeah.
But then when he sees himself, you know, the FBI making such a huge deal, and he's the top news story of every local and national news outlet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, biggest manhunt in the United States history to that point by the FBI in 1984 was for him. So he knew.
Just crazy.
I'm going down. I'm going down. He was 12 miles from the Canadian border when all of that happened. 12 miles in New Hampshire when they took him down.
Just nuts. Just nuts. Wow. Well, let's go from this kind of nuts to these kind of nuts with a little bless your heart. All right, I've got 4 of them today.
4.
Yeah, 4
Okay.
little delicious little stupid criminals.
Delicious.
Yes.
All right. 4 little delicious bless your
Yeah.
heart.
First one I'm calling Who's the Stiff?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Berea, California. One carpool lane violator must have felt like a dummy when he was pulled over recently by Berea police. In heavy traffic Wednesday evening, a pickup truck pulled out suddenly from the carpool lane on northbound 57, close to the Berea officer on a motorcycle, unfortunately. The officer pulled up to the driver's window to warn him about being more careful when changing lanes. That's when the cop noticed something a little funny.
He had a dummy with him,
The
didn't
passenger in the man's vehicle was actually a female mannequin in a hoodie.
he? Oh, my gosh.
Yep, placed there to apparently let him fake his way into the carpool lane on a regular basis. The driver admitted he had been using the mannequin for a while, Berea police said, and now he would just have to resign himself to sitting in traffic like everyone else.
Oh, wah. Whatever.
He was issued a citation for a carpool lane violation, and the Berea PD tweeted, "Nice try."
I actually know somebody who was transporting Recessa Annie. If you've ever learned how to do CPR, you know who she
And
is.
she's only half the body, too.
Yeah. And so she was in the front seat and they used the carpool lane. And it was kind of like, I'm going to get caught. I'm going to get caught. They never got caught.
That's funny. All right, number 2, art class fail.
Okay.
Buffalo, New York. A New York woman who reportedly was driving around with a cardboard license plate wasn't fooling the cops.
Oh,
Deputies with the Erie County Sheriff's Office pulled over Amanda Schweikert, 28, on Wednesday for driving without a front license plate and one on the back that was clearly a fake.
okay.
Once they had stopped her, deputies discovered Schweikert was operating the vehicle with a suspended registration and no insurance.
Ooh.
Schweikert was arrested and charged with possessing a forged instrument, which is a felony. A felony, yeah. She's also facing misdemeanor count of operating a vehicle with suspended registration and 3 vehicle and traffic infractions.
That's like the trifecta.
Yeah,
No license, no plate, no insurance, no drivey.
Yep, the fake plate was taken into evidence and bail was set at $400.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, next one. Happy Father's Day, Pop. A 10-year-old boy was playing with his father's old handcuffs on Father's Day. He
Wait.
Yeah,
His dad's handcuffs?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
did he find them?
I don't know.
Is his dad a police officer? Or these come out of the bedroom? I mean,
Let me continue. here.
okay, sorry.
He cuffed himself to his daddy, William Klein Jr., but the key was lost.
Okay.
William then called the local police in Des Moines, Iowa to help him get the cuffs off. Now, as per routine, police ran Klein through their database
Oops.
and found 2 arrest warrants outstanding. Shortly after, they recuffed Klein, but this time it was for real.
And it wasn't his handcuffs.
No.
No, that poor kid probably feels terrible.
Yeah. Okay, and last but not least, I love this one. What I meant to say, back in 1985, Dennis Newton was on trial for robbing a convenience store. While he was defending himself, claiming to be innocent, he got angry with the store manager who identified him as the robber. Not being able to control his temper, he jumped up and screamed, "I should have blown your head off." After that, he tried to correct himself by saying, well, I mean, if I'd have been there, if I'd have been the one that was there. So this is how criminals defended themselves back in the 1980s. Really?
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, well, there you go.
That was his first mistake.
That's my favorite right
Representing himself was his first mistake.
there. Just stupid.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. There you have it.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, go to hitchedtohomicide.com. There's a pull-down menu.
Yes.
You can also suggest a case just like today's case was suggested.
Yeah, it was a good one.
That's all we have today. That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.